When it comes to sports, I think fans are very often overly critical of players and coaches. Simple mistakes that any human being makes launches people into an overly emotional state where they treat these people like they're robots. Sometimes this is justifiable, but I think we should never resort to just flat out irrational jargon to complain. Except for today, because what this man has managed to do with the Milwaukee Bucks needs to be studied for all the wrong reasons. Now first, let's get some context of who Doc Rivers is. Gun Rivers was a pretty good basketball player. He got the nickname Doc after wearing a Dr. J shirt, and after 3 successful years at Marquette, which would eventually lead to his jersey retirement, he made it to the NBA. While by no means a superstar, Doc had a very nice 14-year NBA career, posting career averages of 11 points, 3 rebounds, and 6 assists a night, including a 1988 All-Star selection and being the Hawks' all-time assist leader at the end of his career. And after calling some games, which he'd periodically return to over the next 2 decades, he became the head coach of the Orlando Magic. In their first year without Penny Hardaway, Doc led the Magic, who were projected to win 29.5 games, to a 500 record, winning Coach of the Year in his rookie head coaching season. Unfortunately, Orlando didn't improve much past these, despite a breakout from Tracy McGrady. To be fair to Doc, Grant Hill fell off a cliff due to injuries once arriving in Orlando, but to not be fair to Doc, he was apparently a big reason for why Tim Duncan didn't sign with them. After a 1-10 start, he got fired and moved on to Boston, where the team got worse every year after his first season with the team, and then the big boys came to town, capturing Boston's first title in over 20 years and the low-end ring of Doc's career. Now, I'm a spring chicken, so I was curious to find out what opinions of Doc were at the time, which were mostly pretty good. I did, however, see a few trends from a minority start to emerge, including one very loud Bill Simmons. Poor development of young players and rookies, a lack of adjustment in crunch time, and an overall sense of not taking accountability. We'll come back to this later. Now, despite having a roster led by 3 for sure Hall of Famers and a 4th maybe Hall of Famer, Boston only ever got back to the finals once, where they lost in an extremely close and hard-fought battle with the Lakers. And you know what, Doc? To be fair to you, some things definitely contributed to that. You know, injuries, Boston's core being old, LeBron, very normal and typical things that teams struggle with. And after the Big 3 was fully broken up, Doc got out of there in a trade to the Clippers. And guess what? This lucky son of a gun has another great roster. A prime Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. That's a first ballot Hall of Famer and another guy who's teetering right on the edge. The West is loaded, but I'm sure they can get something done. 4 50-win seasons, 0 conference finals appearances, and Chris Paul is gone. The team barely finishes over 500, and Steve, I'm totally not going to trade you, Blake. Ballmer, totally just traded you, Blake. But good news. We've got 2 new Hall of Famers for you, Doc. And one of them just had one of the greatest playoff runs ever. We truly are going to make the Clippers the team of LA. What could possibly go wrong? Not the first time a Nugget spoiled the fun of an LA team. Alright, so Doc's gone, but to be fair to him, Chris Paul is cursed. Nothing that he's done up to this point has been his fault. On to Philadelphia, where he has, you guessed it, another 2 Hall of Famers in Joel Embiid and James Harden. Oh, he had Ben Simmons before that, but well, we don't talk about him. And guess what? We're up 3-2 at home against Boston, and the number 1 seeded Bucks just got spanked by Jimmy Butler and the Undraftables. This is your year, Doc. Oh, great! Jason Tatum is building houses for the homeless. He doesn't even know we're playing a basketball game. Time to go back to the conference final. Alright, we still have another shot. Game 7, here we go! Hey, Doc. You're fired. Now, to be fair to Doc, Embiid and Harden are top-tier playoff chokers, and they did a lot of choking here. What's the next stop? Oh, Milwaukee, where it all began. And guess who has another 2 Hall of Famers? This guy does. Now let's get that championship. Calf strain, Achilles strain, bum ankles, painkillers, which everyone knows is just as bad as steroids, blood clot. You know what? Screw you. Torn Achilles, hopes and dreams dashed. But to be fair to Doc, no. This is where I cut the joke. This man is coach Tracy McGrady, Paul Pierce, Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett, Rajon Rondo, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, James Harden, Joel Embiid, Damian Lillard, and Giannis Antetokounmpo, and has won 1 championship. He's been a head coach for 24 full seasons and has made the finals just twice, and only has made 1 conference finals appearance under his belt after that. He's 18-32 in chances to close out the series, has lost 4 Game 7s at home, and he's the only NBA coach ever to blow 2 3-1 leads. Just kidding, he was the only coach to do that before he broke his own record. Truly inspiring stuff.
Yeah, but nobody ever gives me the credit for those first 3 wins.
I'm sorry, Doc. Did you want a cookie along with your participation trophy? Ask yourself this. Why did the 2016 Golden State Warriors get clowned on every time they are brought up? Oh yeah, because they lost 3 straight games after winning 3 of the first 4. That's the reason why you don't get credit, Doc. Because you've done that same thing 3 separate times and no one else has even done it twice. You know, as a Bucks fan, I was in Doc's corner last year a lot. Most people had written the Bucks off when I knew this roster was talented enough to win a championship. at least in 2024 and maybe even in 2025. But then I came to the realization that this team has Damian Lillard and Giannis Antetokounmpo in the middle of their primes, and they aren't even going to have home court advantage in the playoffs. Now, thankfully, Giannis went super mode to help ensure Milwaukee stayed out of the play-in, but seriously, whenever I see people say this duo was a failure because of Giannis or Dame, I get mad. Yes, they had their faults. Dame was a very ball-dominant player for Giannis, and Giannis couldn't set good screens, but they were still a phenomenal duo, ensuring there was always someone that the team could turn to when they needed it most. Now, most of all, injuries ruined this duo. They had one healthy playoff game together, and calling that healthy when Dame was out of shape, being rushed back from a blood clot diagnosis, is a bit of a stretch, hence poor offensive performance. But seriously, how does Doc Rivers, the literal coach, not get absolutely blasted for how he fumbled what could have been an all-time duo? Yeah, some of the blame has to be placed on the players because they didn't play off each other a lot, but where the heck is the blame on Doc Rivers' play designs that also rarely use them together? Whenever Dame or Giannis did come together on these plays, it wasn't because it was specifically made for them, but because they were filling preset roles. Then again, maybe I'm being a little too harsh, because Doc's plays are so freaking basic, redundant, and repetitory that Giannis and Dame should have looked at the plays he was coming up with, thrown them off, and done their own thing. And you know, that was still a large part of Doc's offensive game plan. Just let the stars lead. And guess what? When we had Dame, we could usually get away with this kind of strategizing because Giannis and Dame are just so incredibly talented that even mid-coaching can be overcome. But now Dame is gone, and watching the Bucks this year has been absolutely miserable. Now again, I'm complaining about Doc here. This collection of players has actually grown on me. Yes, even Kyle Kuzma. And while they have their strengths and weaknesses, I don't have a negative perception of any of them. And honestly, the only player in Doc's consistent rotation that has just totally underperformed this year is Gary Trent Jr. And it is with that being said that you absolutely cannot rely on Kevin Porter Jr. or Ryan Rollins to produce any sort of meaningful and consistent offense as the lead shot creators. With Giannis it works because his gravity is so large, but neither are talented enough to be that lead ball handler, and Rollins, who I have tremendous belief in, isn't a great playmaker yet. So now you have to rely on Giannis more than ever to create your offense simply because he's so good and so dominant that he commands the total respect of the defense. But one, he's been injured a lot this season and right now looks like he's out indefinitely. Two, as a result of that, he's playing a lot less time, the lowest minutes per game since his rookie year, in fact. And three, he's not going to get things as easy anymore because opposing teams know they have to focus entirely on him because Dame is no longer there. And somehow this last one is actually proven not to be true because Giannis has improved even more, but the first two still stand. So now you don't have any hope of any significant shot creation for others outside of Giannis, and now you have to rely on your coach to get creative. And Doc absolutely sucks at that. Handoff, 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 handoff. AJ Green deep ball. Handoff. I'm not going through the whole year to check, but I can guarantee you at least 80% of the time straight out of the half this season, especially when down, Milwaukee's first shot is an AJ Green 3. The defense is pretty much the same, Milwaukee falling back to his zone when things get rough. And when teams expose these rudimentary offenses and defenses, they quickly make Milwaukee pay, and Doc often just totally fails to adjust, almost as if we've heard that same thing before. I know Isaiah Stewart isn't exactly basketball Einstein or the most level-headed individual in the room, but seriously, he just hit the nail on the head here. It ain't a hard zone, we just have to move them. And you know, that's what the Pistons did in the games they played Milwaukee around this time. Put Cade in the middle to collapse and to shout. So much of the defense is predicated on banking on shooters to miss. Being honest, I didn't watch the first half of this Hawks game because I was sleeping and didn't realize it was on, but Atlanta shot 1 of 21 in the first half from 3. That's absolutely awful, and I imagine a lot of those shots were wide open based on what I know about this team. And what do you know, they start hitting their threes and suddenly the deficit is gone. Thankfully, CJ McCollum hates Hawks fans or something close to that, but this isn't winning basketball. Another point that was brought up by these Celtics fans was Doc failed to implement young players, and goodness gracious, they're right. This is Andre Jackson Jr. If you're a casual fan, you probably don't know a lot about him. Ajax is a very good athlete, probably only behind Giannis on the team in fact. He's an elite perimeter defender, and his explosiveness means he's useful on the fast break. The problem is that his jump shot's weird, and even though he's got some nice passing and a lot of hustle, he lacks confidence on the offensive end. After starting 2-8 last year, Milwaukee was desperate and inserted Ajax into the starting lineup to try to inject some energy, and what do you know, despite not getting a lot of minutes, Ajax was a pivotal part in the turnaround that season, along with Bucks shooters finally finding their rhythm. Surely Doc will continue to implement, and he's out of the rotation. This year, Milwaukee is in desperate need for a small forward. I love AJ Green. He's a deadly sharpshooter, and when opposing players see him, they probably think, an athletic white guy. food. Only for them to realize that while he isn't athletic, he is a dog and is going to fight and grind out every possession he plays on the defensive end of the court. Yet it's exceptionally hard for him to do that when his coach looks at this 6'3", 190-pound guard and says,
"Yeah, good enough. Throw him at small forward."
He constantly gets attacked by bigger opposing players and is thrown out of position, and while he can occasionally fight off bigger opposing players, that is asking a lot of him, and he is going to tire out more often than is necessary. Andre Jackson, meanwhile, has 3 inches on AJ, 20 pounds, and is far more athletic.
Yeah, but you can't have another non-shooter next to Giannis.
So why the heck have you ever started a Kuzma next to him? I get it, a non-shooter without a lot of confidence. That's a bad recipe. But genuinely, when Ajax has gotten a chance to shoot the ball, he hasn't actually done that bad despite looking like he would. Why? For a team that clearly needs a boost of energy at times, do you keep your biggest energizer sitting on the bench while Gary Trent continues to miss wide open 3 after wide open 3? This isn't because of a fit concern with Giannis, it's because Doc is old-fashioned and doesn't like changing things up and is against going with younger players. I mean, if you weren't aware, the only reason Ryan Rollins even has a place in Milwaukee is because he impressed Doc and Dame was out with a concussion. Injury might have saved Rollins' young career, at least with the Bucks. And come on, man, can we talk about the lack of accountability?
Nobody gives me credit.
Why do you deserve credit? Here's him calling Bill Simmons an idiot by pretending like he's not calling him an idiot because Bill spoke what was on his mind and saw Doc for what he really was all the way back in 2006. Something I've noticed about Doc is that he doesn't give off the impression that he has his players' backs, and for a guy whose locker room ability is his strong suit, that's really bad. Here's a play from the most recent Bucks vs Thunder game where Rollins fronts Holmgren and Chet gets a pass inside that goes to his right. He then hits Rollins in the head, and for some reason, it's a foul on Rollins, sending Fiserv up into an uproar. Doc, what are you going to do next to defend your lead guard? If you weren't watching the Bucks consistently at the start of the season, you probably don't know how frustrated Giannis was getting because of just how bad his whistle was early on. Like, I'm talking Stephen Curry levels of bad for how blatantly some of these calls and no calls were. Now, admittedly, I'm not staying up to watch press conferences with Doc Rivers, yet if a coach was adamantly and firmly defending his players by calling out the blatant discrepancy in calls, some of which could have hurt Giannis, it would have made headlines. Yet that never happened. No information of Doc defending a star player, no fine. Maybe he walked in the locker room after winning these games and said,
"Grr, I'm gonna stick it to them, Giannis."
And Giannis looked at him and said, No, it's fine. But based on how Doc acts, that would be very surprising to me. There are just so many problems with this team specifically that might not show up every night, but are consistent enough to notice. I'm talking about abysmal effort in boxing out and fighting for rebounds, overly risky and just flat out bad passing, especially for professionals, and just an overall sense of sluggishness. And you expect this every once in a while from every team. Maybe the team just got done with a difficult road trip and really needs some rest. Maybe a lot of the roster is banged up, or maybe it's just simply one of those nights. But for things like this to consistently happen is a problem. Now, is it Doc's fault if players don't hustle back on a missed free throw and that leads to an easy score on the other team? No, lapses in judgment happen, even for the professionals. Is it his fault when his team just neglects to box out for a possession? Also no, for the same reason. But when it becomes a trend, that signals that it is the coach's fault. Because the coach is meant to be the culture center. If your guys continuously make these lapses in judgment or effort, then all of a sudden it is becoming less on them not being good professionals and more on you for failing to set up a proper standard. Did you know that the 2008 Boston Celtics, which according to some of their players is the greatest team in any sport forever and all time, played an NBA record 26 playoff games? That included a Game 7 in the first round versus the 37-win Atlanta Hawks. And sure, they faced a young LeBron who after a bad start really turned things up. A still good but weakened Pistons team, and the Lakers led by MVP Kobe and Pau Gasol. But after everything that this head coach has done in his career, how many of those close games do you think his deficiencies as a coach costed Boston? Now, apart from the whole being unable to take accountability thing or giving up on his star point guard in a press conference, even if he deserved it, Doc actually seems like a nice guy. A nice, friendly little grandpa you can talk hoops with on the golf course or at the barbershop because he's there for some reason. I mean, he obviously has his charisma stat maxed out because what other way is he still getting jobs? But the game is very clearly passing by. I want to try and give him an inkling of respect because you don't spend the past 27 years as an NBA head coach off of charisma alone. At one point, Doc had to be at least a semi-competent coach, but that time is very clearly past. It's time for him to retire and move on to whatever else he has planned. I'm sure someone wants to hear him calling a nationally televised game. Pretty much everyone knows Doc is one of the worst coaches in the league, but if you even dare think that your coach is as hated by your franchise as Doc is in Milwaukee, think again. I mean, look at all these posts on the Bucks subreddit. Doesn't really inspire confidence, does it? I just find it a little bit ironic that in the same building that he'll forever be honored by his jersey hanging up in the rafters from his days at Marquette, he'll forever be despised because he will be a key piece in the story of how the greatest athlete in Milwaukee's history left town. Please fire Doc Rivers. Thank you all for watching, and if you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, and also checking out this last video where I talk about Jimmy Butler's legacy a little bit. Have a great day, everybody.